I am trapped in this closet, and I just dropped my phone. I'm gonna have to do some crazy shit to get this. Okay. Wizards of the Coast sent me the new monster manual, and I have some thoughts about it. We're in the mini closet today to talk about the stats that make up all these miniatures. You got Elesh Norn in the monster manual? No? Okay. This is not a paid advertisement or anything. I was just sent the book ahead of time by the D&D creator team. They also sent me that one, which is pretty cool. I'm not being paid to say anything. These are my opinions. I want to let you guys know what to look forward to before you buy the book. If that's something that you want to do, if you want to buy this. But before we do that, this video is sponsored by Factor. Oh! Skip all the prep time and quickly make your meals every day with Factor. Factor makes eating right really convenient. They come in these boxes, shipped to your front door, filled with meals that you get to handpick. And you open them, poke some holes in them, toss them in the microwave for 2 minutes, and they taste amazing. I think they sent me juice. Juice! They've also got these cold pressed juices, which are delicious. I had to wait to not drink this because I needed to record this. And I only have one left because I drank the rest of them. Spencer and I, for having a busy day, they're super easy to heat up and they taste like homemade, guys. We're both constantly surprised at the quality that Factor delivers. They have great ingredients, they're super good for you, and if you're starting to go to the gym like I am, they are amazing for keeping your protein intake high. It's mainly because they're freshly made and then they're not frozen. So head to factor75.com and use my code 50fireball to get 50% off your first box and free shipping. That's factor75.com. There's a link in the description and in the comments, and use my code 50fireball to get 50% off. Okay, back to the video. Okay, I don't think I'm gonna do this for the rest of the video. This is silly. The art direction for all of the 2024-25 books is absolutely amazing. The cover is amazing. This is the alt cover right here, has a mind flayer on it. Also, the back here is also very cool. With a lot of the monsters, they have a stylistic through line that follows the creature type. So for example, like the Fays, like sprites and pixies, have this similar design that's sort of fairy tale-esque cover of a book. It's very ethereal. Meanwhile, the devils have this like very rendered, sort of almost model-like essence to them that makes them look very intimidating, imposing, and almost surreal. That also follows the same design that was in Chains of Asmodeus, which is very cool. I think in general, the art style is very dreamy to me. It looks more concept-like rather than like, this is exactly what a monster is supposed to look like. This is a theme that carries through the entirety of this monster manual, which is my favorite part about it. Now, there are some things that I don't necessarily like. I'll get to those at the end. But I think overall, I want to talk about what my first impressions were when I got to read the book, and then thoughts I've had over the past few days as I've had the book. I guess I should start off and just say, I love the monster manual. I think I like it more than any of the other books. It is such a fun book to sit down and look through. The Player's Handbook is a collection of necessary rules to play the game. I love the direction they took with the DM's Guide, which was to help DMs come up with ideas to fuel their stories and be a better DM at the table. But when it comes to the monster manual, I mean, when I was first DMing, this was where I got all of my inspiration. I would just open up the monster manual to a random page and be like, that would be cool if that was in today's game. Or maybe I'll structure an adventure around this monster. I like looking at art. I'm a very visual person, and flipping through the monster manual was one of my favorite things that honestly got me into D&D. Not just because of the creature design or the art style, but a combination of those things plus stat blocks. I don't know why I love stat blocks. Creatively, I love being put in a box because it allows me to branch out of it once I feel comfortable that I can. So I can take the stat block of a dragon, run it a few times, which is kind of fun to do because then you get to follow rules and you get to see exactly what a dragon can do. You see the stylistic design, but then there's always a point as a DM when you're like, oh, I wish the monster could do this. And then that's when you start crafting and adding and making your own stat blocks. It's fun. It's a fun bit of rule crafting and game design that I think is genuinely super interesting to make yourself. Now, because I've run monsters and read so many stat blocks, I love creating my own because I've got to do it in the past. So to me, the monster manual, the 2014 one, this one, any other monster manual that I get my hands on, just encourages creativity. It's fun to see a crazy monster and look at the art and be like, whoa, that thing's crazy. What can it do? Oh, that's so awesome. It could do this thing. And then you're like, what if it could also do this thing? You're like, I don't know. That's awesome. There's an overall general simplification in a good way to a lot of these monsters that feels like it's meant to be built upon. In comparison to the 2014 Monster Manual, where they were like describing what a creature or a monster is and like laying groundwork, which I don't know if was really necessary to be there. Like, this is what a person is. Okay, I don't think I need the Monster Manual to tell me that. They start off by giving you ideas first, and they simplify a lot of the nitty-gritty, which I personally love. It doesn't feel like these creatures have been dumbed down. It feels more like they've cut a lot of the chaff to make room for more D&D instead of rules clarifications. The 2014 Monster Manual has so much clarifying text. When I was going through and comparing some of the stat blocks to the old ones, it's so surprising how much that didn't bother me until I started reading the new one. You'll have a monster ability that'll be like spear, melee or ranged attack, 10 if melee, 30 if ranged, 1 target, hit, damage. If a creature that isn't a construct or an undead is hit by this, they must succeed a DC 12 Constitution saving throw or else become poisoned for 1 minute. If they succeed the saving throw on a consecutive turn, they can no longer be poisoned by this ability for 24 hours. And it would be like this big. The new one is more along the lines of like spear, melee attack, hit, damage, saving throw, Constitution 12, failure, you become poisoned for 1 minute. That's it. It's this big now, and it's so much easier to see at a glance. And it's theoretically kind of doing the same thing. And there also might be a line at the end that says, can also be a ranged attack that is 30 feet. Easy. And one of the best parts of the new book is these notations that they've added in to creature actions that very quickly, at a glance, tell you what you need to know. How many times have you been running a monster stat block and you thought you read it correctly, and then you go back on another turn and read it all the way to the end, and you realize that there's like a sentence at the end that's like, oh, actually, this doesn't happen at all if this condition is met, and you're like, why wasn't that first? These notations help out a lot with that. So you've got ones that are like hit, miss, or hit or miss, instead of being like, regardless if this attack hits or not. There's also succeed or fail. So if you succeed the check, this happens. If you fail the check, this happens. Initiative bonus. Now you don't have to look at the dex check and be like, it's dex. And then maybe they have an ability that is underneath all of those stats that says, oh, well, they get advantage on their initiative checks. Now there's just an initiative part, and some creatures get their proficiency bonus added to their initiative, or even more beyond that, which is really cool in design for some creatures. Like a Chain Devil has a +2 dex, but it's getting to add its +5 to its initiative, so they can hopefully, before the other players, get to illusory turn into, you know, the corpse of a loved one or whatever it is. Saving throws are next to the modifiers now. That saves so much space on the stat block. And also, you're already looking there anyways. Strength, mod, save. Oh, now I know there's a difference. Now I know it's just a strength check, the +2, whatever. I don't have to go searching for whatever the saving throw is. It's just right next to it. Resistances and immunities are also simplified. It just says resistant and immune, and they put the conditions and the damages in the same type. And they added the proficiency bonus onto the actual stat block next to the challenge rating. It's so nice. Which, again, is just going into the idea that these are meant to be changed. Here's the proficiency bonus in case you want to give it a new ability. There's a whole section in the DM's guide that is like, hey, you want to customize monsters? Here's a way to customize it. Though I kind of wish they put that in the monster manual instead, but whatever. I guess a monster manual is an entire book filled with all of these abilities, so you could just take, you know, the ability off of a griffin and give it to a gelatinous cube. I don't know. Another thing I really like is the multiple creature types that they've added. So instead of just having Aarakocra, you now have 2 different types of Aarakocras. You have lots of different type of general humanoid stat blocks too, like cultists, berserkers, thugs, or they're called toughs actually. Guards, warriors, there's performers, and there's normally like 2 to 3 to 4 different stat blocks with varying challenge ratings. And I really like how the really high level ones can be almost boss level or for late game. They have like over 100 hit points, which is so nice. You don't have to take the stupid, terrible guard stat block and then go, okay, how do I make this even stronger? Or do I just use the veteran one? I guess I'll use champion. Oh, this one's more of a fighter, if anything. Now they have like a higher level guard stat block or a higher level performer stat block or like a boss level cultist stat block. It reminds me a lot of Flea Immortals, the MCDM monster book, where they really get into the tactics of different types of monsters like minions and support and specialists and boss monsters, which is a lot of fun. And they seem to be kind of leaning in that direction slightly. There's definitely some inspiration there, you can kind of tell. There's like a goblin minion stat block that doesn't really follow like the minion rules that Flea Immortals does, but it's like along the same line. It's like kind of there. I like that. I think that's a great addition. Now, if we're looking at big scale changes, one thing that I noticed when I was comparing the stat blocks to the 2014 Monster Manual is that there is this widespread buff, I guess, of every monster stat block. The biggest one being hit points. Almost every creature in this monster manual has more hit points. Some don't, some have a little bit more, and then some are like very drastic. There is also a damage increase on nearly every single stat block. So they've really simplified in a good way. These stat blocks increase their hit points, increase their damage output. And then another thing that I noticed is they kind of tend to turn down the armor class a little bit, which oh my god, I love. More often than not, I was seeing an armor class decrease and then a subsequent hit point like mega boost, which I think is way better. It's far more fun to hit. Like, you want your players to hit the monster. I'm not saying make every monster AC 10, but I think more often than not, monsters should have a lower armor class, and then you save that one high AC monster for somebody that's really, really strong, or like really hard to hit, instead of like every monster above challenge rating 15 having an 18 plus AC. That's ridiculous. And then I think the subsequent hit point bonus just feels better, I think, in the long term for the games. Well, not accounting for the fact that they did buff most of the classes in the player's handbook. So maybe that is just sort of like a trade-off here, that they're like, well, we got to buff the hit points of all the monsters here. But I feel like that was just kind of needed anyways. I don't know, guys. I've been playing a lot of 5e D&D, and I don't know if you knew this, but the monster stat blocks are kind of weak. And I think there's this general sort of buff to all of the monsters that I think is very welcome. Oh, another thing I really liked was the new dragon stat blocks. They really differentiated between the types. Some dragon stat blocks have spell casting on them, which is so awesome. That's another thing that they really simplified in these stat blocks that we sort of saw as books came out. I think Mordenkainen's Guide to the Multiverse really changed how spells work, making them like once per day, 2 times per day each, or on recharge, instead of giving you the exact amount of slots and then you have to track the slots of the monster. That is also prevalent here. I think that is a much easier way to track spells on a monster. Also a really cool thing, a lot of legendary monsters, if they're in their lair, gain an additional legendary action. And the legendary actions, oh my gosh, they've been like completely redone. I think all of the dragon stat blocks now have the frightening presence under their legendary actions, instead of it being just this passive thing that they have, which you always forget about. You roll up the dragon and then everybody has to roll a save at the start of their turn, and you always forget because you're excited to run a dragon. I've done it, we've all done it. Now, when you're like, ooh, I can take an active thing at the end of somebody's turn to do this frightening ability, that feels a lot better instead of it just being like this passive thing. Overall, there's a lot less passives. There are a lot more actives, which I think is much more fun to play with, much easier to remember. Another way to sort of describe how simplification has happened here, the dragon stat blocks don't have like bite, claw, tail, wings, all these things. Instead, they just have a rend attack, and that can just be one of those things. It can be their tail, it can be their claws, it can be whatever. You just have a rend attack. And then it made more room for other cool abilities like spell casting, their breath weapons, which aren't just called breath weapons now. They're called cold breath, fire breath. It's awesome. Oh, another one of my favorite. Oh, this is actually my favorite thing that they put in the book. Every creature has a little subtext Dark Souls Elden Ring boss name underneath it. So hobgoblins have Conqueror of Every Horizon. Harpy has Winged Voice of Doom. Copper dragons, dragons of curiosity and community. Blue dragons, dragons of tyranny and tempests. Cyclopses, monocular servants of destiny. Mummies, deathless ancients with ageless ambitions. And then they also put in their habitat, so like mummy, it says desert, swamp, and their treasure, which is relics right next to it. I love that they have that. You can open up this book to a random page, see a cool piece of art, see its name, its little title, where it lives, you get a fun little description and a very simple stat block to run it and change it if you want to. Oh, so good. I don't really engage too much in the D&D drama online. I just don't. I don't have a reason. I just don't. It's just whatever. But I've seen some people be like, there's no orcs in the book anymore or whatever. Okay, so I guess let's just talk about that for a second, because this is sort of like a con on my list, but it's a little more complicated than that. So just to briefly explain, if there is a species in the player's handbook that you can play as, it doesn't have like a stat block in the monster manual. So you don't have like a tiefling or an orc. I think orcs is the one that people are most like about, because Lord of the Rings. I know orcs have been like a staple in fantasy for a long time, but I like what they have done better. But they've got Aarakocras in there, and they've also got the Beast Lord things, and they've also got lots of other creatures that aren't in the player's handbook as that thing there. We've got Goblin and Hobgoblin. Those have stat blocks. Why don't orcs? I'm going to go off pure speculation here. I have no idea, but this would be my thought process if I was, working on this book. I think it's the same reason why they've moved away from the term race and instead gone to species. They don't want to monsterify the creature that you're about to play and the character that you could also potentially play, but they do want to monsterify some of the other creatures that exist within D&D, like the bird people. In the mythos and fantasy of Dungeons & Dragons, an Aarakocra is more meant to be in the DM's toolbox rather than the player's. I think that's mostly what this is. I don't think this necessarily has to do with the fact that making an evil orc is racist or anything. I think they want some things on the player's side and some things on the DM's side. When you roll up to play a regular game of Dungeons & Dragons, and maybe not a lot of people have played before, you can't play a Silver Dragon. That's just not really in the toolbox that the book is giving you. So therefore, it makes sense that we also wouldn't put orc as a monster that you also fight. Also, it doesn't make a lot of sense either to just have default orc. They're trying to diversify a lot of these species. So instead, you've got these general sort of humanoid stat blocks that can fit any of the type of species. They even do that with the art. Like the noble stat block has a dragonborn and an orc on it. And then the warrior stat block has an Aasimar and a human. Kind of to give you the idea that these can be any of the species that are in the player's handbook. And then you can give them those abilities if you want to. I just think they're done generalizing monsters and types. Well, I don't know about that. There's still alignment on everything. Mind flayers are evil, and they will just be evil. Whatever. So I don't know, it's kind of this weird gray line right in between, but I think I agree. Not because I'm just trying to glaze the Monster Manual or Wizards of the Coast, because I can see the design intention there. I think there is a lot of merit in the design decision to just kind of do it and not explain why you've done that, to let everybody else argue about it instead. And I'm adding fuel to that fire, and I don't like it. I think they can do whatever they want. It's their book. It's their design. It's what they want to do. They want to make orc a species. They don't want to make it a monster. So instead of drawing a line, they sort of just go, no, that's not in there anymore, and we're not going to explain why. And that's really smart. That is the smart way to go about that. They don't want to have this design thing, so they're just going to silently do it and not explain why. That happens a lot more often than you think. And I think as players of this game and consumers of this product, it's better that way. If they go and try to explain it with like a bunch of stuff, it's going to turn into like this whole controversy. The media is going to turn it some other way or another, and everybody's going to think it's terrible and stuff. But it's not going to stop YouTubers like me from talking about it. Sorry. I don't think it's that big of a deal. It's fine. It's whatever. All right, overall, let's wrap this up. I like the new Monster Manual. I think it's great that we've got more simplified stat blocks that are easier to homebrew, easier to do your own ideas with, easier to implement your own ideas. You can open up the book and at a glance, you get an idea of what a monster is. You get a cool title, description. The stat blocks are easier to read, easier to run. And overall, I think this is a major improvement from 2014. Abilities are focused more on the idea that makes them cool rather than like, this is what a spear does, and we have to follow exactly to what a spear does, otherwise then the whole game doesn't work anymore. More of a focus on your ideas, the narrative, and fun. That's how it should be. I think that's great. Good job. I can't wait to start using it. I think that's my biggest thing. I can't wait to start using this thing. I want to try out these stat blocks and see how fun they are to run. And last thing, I do think that the redesign on some of them visually is good. I love all of the devils. All of the devils look way cooler. The black dragon as well, I love the way that it looks. The skull on the front of its face, because it's got acid and it's like melting its face and it's got bone right there. That is so sick. Is it annoying that this is now inaccurate? Yes. But that's the natural progression of things, and I think that complaining about it is dumb, and stop it. just have fun. We're gonna get new minis. Doesn't that sound fun? Oh well, guess I'm just gonna have to buy more. Just remember, guys, that at the end of the day, this is a hobby. It's for fun. It's a game. And people wrote this book and made the art in it and worked really hard on that. And I think I would like to just commend those people who did that. I'm not a big Wizards of the Coast lover, or I hate Hasbro with all my heart. All my heart. God. But I think this book and this product is pretty good. Okay, shut up, Jacob. Stop yapping, bruh.